What's up, dudes? Davey here, hoping you're all doing well. Mabo is a goofy-ass game when it comes to explaining mechanics or big things that you can do in order to have a better time running content in the game. So, in this video, I want to talk about the world of buffing, and the combos of buffs you can do in order to quickly and efficiently buff up. Because seeing big numbers is cool. But first, let's get rid of those icons over your head and move them to a better place. Go ahead and open up your character tab, click on the status icon, and now you have a UI showing all of your buffs and, God forbid, debuffs, as well as other status effects from gear, events, and etc. This also shows the durations, if any, and is just a nice, centralized, and coherent place to show your status effects. If your aim is to run mid to in-game content, you need to use this window, and will always be vital in your battle against the bad guys. So, with that out of the way, let's start off with maybe the most important or most integral buffs, the Bard skills, also known as music buffs. Bards are the pretty rad people of the group, the minstrels. Nay, the artificers of what gives the companions the motivation to pull up their britches and make the enemy done like dinner. In other words, they give you buffs by playing music, and Bard skills offer maybe two of the most integral buffs in the game. Battlefield Overture, or BFO for short, and Vivace. BFO offers an increase in physical min and max damage, where Vivace offers faster casting speed and alchemy loading speed. And most would say that Battlefield Overture is the best skill in the game since it boosts your physical damage by a percentage. Which is why this video is a technical part 3 to both the leveling and stats video and the increasing your damage vid. Since having a higher max damage will benefit you a lot more from a BFO over not having a high max. For example, a 30% increase of 100 max is a lot different than a 30% increase of 1000 max. As for Vivace, the faster casting speed means faster fireballs, meteors, fusion bolts, thunder, etc. As well as your dark diviner skills. Like, a high Vivace can cast things like Vortex before the load animation even finishes. Trust me, it's huge to use Vivace if you're a DD. It can also significantly increase your normal and party healing speeds, as well as the Harmonic Saint skill Pulse of Purification. Since Bard buffs are the most demanding ones in the game, and rightfully so, things like titles, enchants, and reforges that manipulate how much BFO increases your damage, or how much your Vivace increases your cast or load times, are some of the most expensive in the game. Thankfully, you can find titles, enchants, and reforge gear that are just a step below best in slot for a more reasonable price. Check out Krau's and Seven's guide to see all the available stuff, and check the prices on the auction house to compare. Also, if you're all about support, healing, and buffing, being a Harmonic Saint will give a bonus to music buffs, and they also get an increase to buff durations. Speaking of Harmonic Saints, also known as the White Mages of the game, they are able to send out 2 musical buffs at the same time, as long as they're not both BFO and Vivace. The most popular quote-unquote secondary buff is March Song for the increase in movement speed. A cool hot tip for both Harmonic Saints and non-Harmonic Saints is to summon a 2-on pet while a music buff is expiring to get an extended buff. If you don't have a 2-on, you can also leech off someone else's in the party. Just stand on or next to the 2-on while your music buff is expiring. Also, you could take this a step further by utilizing Pet Harmony, which increases the duration of your music buffs for each different pet type summoned in your party, just before a music buff is played. Last, but certainly not least for combat music buffs, there is Fantastic Chorus, which enables the player to put down 2 types of auras, Life Anthem and Sorrow Sonata. Life Anthem gives all players and pets within the aura a regeneration bonus to health, mana, and stamina. Sorrow Sonata is actually a debuff and will slow enemy targets in its aura and reduce skill loading speed as well as reduce some enemy stats. It's actually pretty important to lay down a nice spread of red circles in both mob and boss rooms, just to slow them down. Now, let's turn our attention to consumables, by starting off with maybe the best physical damage consume you can pop off: power potions. Power potions give a 20% increase to your physical damage. You can obtain these several different ways through events, fin whistle selling, dungeon vouchers, VIP boxes, the auction house, and guild shops. If you would like a free and readily available version, there are Bone Dragon Fragments. By having a friend or a mob kill your Bone Dragon pet, a Bone Fragment consumable drops, which is the equivalent to a power pot, but only lasts 2 minutes. You can get a free Bone Dragon pet from completing the Blanded questline, and as I have mentioned in my debuff video, from the dungeon guide. You should always have a power pot or bone frag active, not only for the increase in damage, but the power pot and bone fragments actually get applied again when BFO is active. That's once to your max damage, and once more to your BFO, increasing your max damage even more. Again, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of having a power pot or bone frag active when BFO is active, since they both benefit from each other. Now, let's turn our attention to magic power pots, which increases your magic attack by 80 points. You can obtain magic power pots from events, the auction house, gachas, VIP daily boxes, and the guild shop. These bad boys give you a fixed boost to your magic attack rather than the percentage like power pots. So, if you're looking for more magic attack, whether to reach the seething mana piercing thresholds, or to squeeze a little bit more damage or healing out of your spells, these are the drink of choice. And they taste like blue. Let's move over to having picnics on the bodies of the slain with catering. Catering is a buff that is dependent on what you put into the basket. You bring a bunch of hot chocolate, there's a bunch of strength and health for ya. Udon from a mobile food truck, there's a lot of defense and protection. It's a smorgasbord of whatever you want. A good and affordable ultimate cater would be 10 of Lorna's special lunch boxes, which can be bought from other players through the auction house or gathered through VIP boxes. Also, you can increase the duration of a cater buff by 10 minutes with Grandmaster Cooking activated when placing down a cater. But yeah, it's always a good idea to place one of these down before a fight begins or before you start a dungeon. So, let's mosey on over and talk about golden magical wool. Like, what do? Pop some wool into your mouth and eat it? Actually, you could say the same thing about bone dragon fragments. Anyways, consuming golden magical wool increases your physical defense by 20% and your physical protection by 10%. You can obtain these from your sheep pet that you get for free from the Blanded questline by simply shearing the sheep until it drops. They only last for a minute, so it's best to stack them up and have them ready to eat. Another good consume that increases your physical defense and protection capabilities is a protection/defensive buff potion, which adds another 5 points to each for 36 minutes. You can obtain these from the Fin Deer for 10 gold leaves, and you can also find these in the end chests in dungeons such as Rabbi Advanced Hard Mode. Some other notable consumes are musical buff potions that add another 2 to your music buff, magic casting speed pots that speed up your, well, casting speed. I don't know the exact increase in speed, but it's definitely noticeable. Things that increase your casting speed like the potion, reforges, Urg, Vivace, etc. are also a great way to minimize mana usage since the mana drains while casting. So, the faster the cast, the less mana that is consumed. There are also movement speed potions that come in a variety of speeds and durations. I'd say that movement speed is one of the more underrated stats in the game, since moving faster means having an easier time evading and positioning. You can also temporarily increase you and your party's speed with Shield of Trust, and ranking the sub-skill Guarded Footsteps. Shield of Trust is also a great temporary immune to knockback skill, and its other sub-skills can heal wounds, recover health, and add more magical defense and protection. Activating Demi also gives a temporary boost to your movement speed, and various pets can also briefly increase your movement speed upon summoning, like the Fallen Fairy. In Mabo, there are 2 items you can add to your weapons and gear: Holy Water and Holy Flame. Holy Water helps slow your weapon and gear's durability loss, and Holy Flame speeds up your item's durability loss, but also adds stats to each piece of gear. If you don't mind paying for more repairs, it's best to add Holy Flames to each piece of gear for more stats for the respective talent or arcana, and add max damage to a weapon for more max. Speaking of stats and max, don't forget about doll bags. Doll bags, when summoned, give different stats to the player depending on the doll bag summoned. And like always, check out Krause and Seven's Best in Slot Guide to see all the various doll bags. Let's talk about Scythe buffs, debuffs, and its celestial conjunction system. Now, I don't have an education high enough to give you a dissertation of the intricacies of Scythe abilities, since this stuff is pretty overwhelming to look at for the first time, and the 50th time. Also, for some reason, the game labeled Scythe as a beginner talent, but since this is meant to be introductory, you have 4 aspects: offense, support, control, and fortune. Each aspect offers different abilities to add to each respective skill, including, but not limited to, buffs and debuffs. Now, in order to not overwhelm you, or myself, I will talk about the 3 skills I use often and what I added to each. This may differ from what you or others use or prefer, but I don't think there's an exact meta with what aspects to add. It's more so of what works for you. In other words, as long as you can keep the buff and debuff up, you're good. First, go to the Stellar Citadel because this game is simple and intuitive, and you have to be here in order to access the Celestial Conjunction stuff. And copy the aspects I used for each skill. For a buff, use Orbital Pulse, and add Enemy Takes Boosted Damage under the Support tab, Quick Recovery under the Fortune tab, Party Physical Damage Boost level 1 and 2, Party Magic Damage Boost level 1 and 2, and HP Recovery. Gravity Well will be your ultimate gather skill. Add Pull level 1 and 2, Range level 1 and 2, additional attack to help keep stun after the pull, and Party Physical Damage level 1 and 2 as a filler. Nova Blast will be a debuffer, so add Range level 1 and 2, Pull level 1 and 2, Quick Recovery, and lower enemy defense and protection level 1 and 2. And Starlight Veil is a hybrid buff/debuffer. Add Pull level 1 and 2, lower enemy defense and protection level 1 and 2. Enemy takes boosted damage, make fortune, and range level 1. And then add in the center triangle, debuff effect duration level 1 and 2, as well as HP recovery. So, it should look like this. Buff yourself with Orbital Pulse, use Gravity Well to pull, Nova Blast for debuff, and then DPS. If you want a more in-depth guide, check out Roa's video. It goes way more in detail on how this stuff works, and it's pretty darn awesome. I'll link it down below. Now, let's transition and talk about tech cards. Tech cards are a series of benefits and abilities that come in the form of passive and active skills. You can start to unlock these by completing Generation 22 and doing all the subquests to unlock. And trust me when I say that you will want to utilize tech cards, since they offer some of the best core gameplay abilities and stats. Starting with what might be one of the most diverse tech skills, Fate Weaver. In my debuff guide, I emphasize the importance of utilizing Fate Weaver to debuff your enemies. Now, I am here to put emphasis on utilizing Fate Weaver to buff yourself and your allies. In the debuff guide, I said the best debuff combo is 3-1-5-2 to apply to enemies in order to debuff their movement speed, loading times of skills, physical and magical defense and protection, and decreases their damage, magic attack, and balance. Now, in order to buff yourself or your allies, the combo 5-2-3-1 enhances yourself with the same attributes 3-1-5-2 weakens. Like how a power potion/bone fragment applies to your max in Battlefield Overture, 5231 also works in a similar way, so keep that in mind if you really want to min-max your damage output. And since 3152 and 5231 are considered combos, they receive a 2% increase in each respective effect. So, always combo. One last Fate Weaver buff to yourself or an ally is to simply apply 4, also known as Aspect of Focus, to yourself or an ally to give them a 3-second Shadow Cloak or Hide effect. It's a good last-ditch effort to withdraw aggro from yourself or an ally. It does have a 30-second cooldown for whomever was affected though, so don't think for a moment you can just spam it and stay safe. The next card I'd like to talk about is Exploit Weakness. Exploit Weakness is a 3-minute long buff with a 10-minute cooldown that offers a 15% damage bonus and an extra 1 pierce to your attacks. It's a great skill to use at bosses, or when you need the extra punch on your attacks. It's important to note that the Fate Weaver aspect might, or the damage buff, will not stack with Exploit Weakness. So, use either or, and not both at the same time. Next, I'd like to talk about Redouble Defensive, which has a 5% chance to activate per hit, and gives an additional 200% damage from the original hit. I'd say this is one card that should almost always be a part of your 5-card set, since it takes no resources, and it's basically free damage whenever it procs. Because seeing big numbers is cool. Let's now talk about Phantasmal Scythe, which adds an extra 3% damage to any target caught within its aura. The affected enemy, once defeated, has a chance to drop Phantasmal Remnants, which is the quote-unquote ammo for Fate Weaver. And the more health an enemy has, the higher chance a remnant will drop. Phantasmal Remnants are also tradable, so it could be a potential moneymaker if you're willing to farm, since remnants are a valuable resource. Phantasmal Scythe can also be used to farm materials from places such as ore veins, herb plants, wood cutting stations, just to name a few. You should always gather from the yellow colored areas, since they will guarantee you a super lucky drop each time, which is a great way to get a lot of one item very quickly. A cool hot tip is to utilize Harvest Song for faster harvesting times, and to deploy doll bags to gather the mats while you farm. The next card I'd like to talk about is Relentless. What is this? What the hell is this? Anyways, next is Relentless Assault, which is great for faster casting times, attack speed, and aim speed. Relentless Assault is good for brioing or pragging, especially if a target requires a lot of hits to fully brio or prag. It's a good card to use during a hits per second phase, since you are able to do regular hits a lot faster. The next card I'd like to mention is Iron Will, which offers immunity to knockbacks, which allows the player to perform actions while under heavy fire. It should be noted that Iron Will does not offer an increase to your tankiness, so be aware that you can continue to take shots while not moving an inch, but will prevent you from being stun locked. You can add a hit point threshold, however, with Vital Surge, which allows a player a 10,000 HP bar when activated, and fills your original HP bar completely. It's a great last-ditch card to utilize if you are almost dead, or you know you're going to be taking a lot of hits shortly. If you do die, however, the Defiance card offers a 20% chance that you will resurrect with all of your health. Also, you can increase the odds of a resurrection to 25% with a set like the Devastation armor. This is a great card to use in a place like Glen, since the Defiance proc will not affect your lifelink. Now, let's talk about 2 cards that will help preventing needing Defiance: Blunting Field and Dampening Shock. Dampening Shock adds another 315 defense and 150 magic defense, and Blunting Field adds 15 protection and 58 magic protection. I would almost always recommend having both of these cards in every set, since they are passive and help tremendously in surviving more than one hit, once you start doing later game content. But yeah, if you think about the stacks for just an Udon Cater, Golden Sheep Wool, a Defense Prot buff potion, and Blunting Field, it would add 60 protection to a naked character, which is 50% physical damage reduction. If you want to know more about how defense and protection work, please refer to my debuff guide to better understand the importance of protection. Next is Time Shift, which allows a player to use a skill 5 times in a row with no cooldown within a set period of time. It's a great card for spamming your main Arcana skills quickly, or to use a skill you wouldn't normally have access to for quite some time, like Meteor. A strategy many utilize is using the Sandglass enchant when activating Time Shift to bring the total of uses to 6. Let's talk about Zone of Renewal, which is a ground aura that continuously heals health, stamina, mana, wounds, and brings a player back from deadly, and helps with potion poisoning. If you are a Harmonic Saint, I'd say this card should always be in your repertoire, and it stacks with other healing abilities as well, which we will talk about in a moment. Let's move over to Tenacious Taunt, which acts as a way to automatically pull aggro from anything within its radius. It's a necessary skill for something like Theta if you need a tank, and it can be a good way to deter mobs from aggroing other party members. Yeah, the ultimate aggro tool. Now, let's talk about the Shield Tech card. I've actually mentioned this card before in my Where I Think This Game Is Going video, and I called this card shitty, but then I wrote it's not that bad. I guess I should probably explain what I meant. It's a good card since when you activate it, it protects you and 5 others around you for 520% damage reduction of the caster's max HP, which is really good for content that involves a lot of high damage, since this tech can probably tank a lot of what is thrown at you. The bad part is that it only applies to 1 hit, or a 10-second window, and then it has a 5-minute cooldown. It's just really not worth the slot that it takes up. I mean, personally, I think the cooldown should last like 1 minute, and applies the buff for all 10 seconds of its duration, rather than just 1 hit. Then, I think you could really start to define a tank-like player that way. Maybe that's too good, or maybe that's not good enough, but who am I to say? I mean, I'm making a video on a 20-year-old MMO on a Friday night. That's pretty cool, right? Next is the tech card Elemental Attunement, which takes advantage of the weapon's enchanted element to have a chance to proc an effect. The 3 elements that you can add to your weapon are Ice, Fire, and Lightning. You can imbue a weapon with these elements with elementals, which can be farmed from sprites or gathered from various other places in the world. Ice slows all targets by 45%, Fire bleeds targets by 100% of the player's damage, and Lightning decreases the knockdown timer by 50%. Some good uses for this card is to use Ice with Flame Burst and something like Crom Boss to help with slowing down movement speed of mobs. Fire gives tick damage over time if you need it. And Lightning is sorta garbage in its current state, and maybe is only effective in PvP? Question mark? If you know a good use for it, let me know. Next is Unified Might, which actually comes in 2 parts. The first part is the charging phase. The charging phase grants the Awaken buff, which increases all party members' damage by 15% for 10 seconds, and collects up to 50k damage. Upon casting the skill, it dumps its collected portion of damage to the target multiplied by 10. Unified Might has a 15-minute cooldown after the skill has been casted, so a cool hot tip is to start the first phase, also known as the charging phase, and then cancel it so you don't have the 15-minute cooldown. The skill costs 3 phantasmal amalgams per use, so keep that in mind when using the skill repeatedly, since amalgams are sort of shitty to make, and they cost kind of a lot on the auction house. Also, Unified Might works well with Iron Will, since if you are interrupted, you will still lose the spent phantasmal amalgams. Next is Protective Touch, which procs after the player uses their Spirit Awakening skill. Protective Touch adds 84 physical defense and 5 physical protection, as well as 39 magical defense and 22 magic protection, and will last the duration of your Spirit Awakening. If you're trying to min-max your protective capabilities, this card will add to that, but it's actually pretty bad and I think it needs a rework. Also, speaking of spirits, there is Continuous Awakening, which grants you a 50% chance that your Spirit Awakening skill will reset, so you can use it once more. With how potent the damage increase is with Spirit Awakening, this card can definitely come in handy. So, now that I've listed all these cards, Here are some general examples of sets to use. Now, you can customize these however you like, but I think these are a good general foundation that I would assume are pretty commonly used. For a DPS set, I would include Blunting Field and Dampening Shock for survivability, Redouble Defensive for the extra damage whenever it procs, Exploit Weakness for the extra damage, and Fate Weaver, Iron Will, or Defiance, depending on if you need it to buff, debuff, if you need the knockback invulnerability, or Defiance if you would like the chance to revive. For Time Shift, use Blunting Field and Dampening Shock. You can also substitute Dampening Shock for Iron Will for knockback protection or Vital Surge for the extra HP. You can choose Redouble Defensive, Exploit Weakness, and or Fate Weaver, and of course, Time Shift. A healing set would include Blunting Field and Dampening Shock, Zone of Renewal for extra healing, Fate Weaver, and your last slot could include Iron Will, Unified Might, Phantasmal Sight, Defiance, Vital Surge, or even Time Shift if you want to spam healing spells or Pulse of Purifications. A tank set would include Blunting Field and Dampening Shock, Defiance, Iron Will, Vital Surge, and or Fate Weaver, or Shield, and or Tenacious Taunt. A tank set is largely dependent on how the new Shield Arcana will play out, so we'll just have to wait and see. I should also mention that you can create hotkeys to switch between sets by going to Options, Game, the Hotkey tab, and down to the tech card slots. For me, my hotkeys are Control, Z, X, C, V, B. Now, let's talk about Glyphs. Glyphs are a self buff that you can add to yourself, or as a ground aura that can buff friendlies or debuff enemies, depending on the type of glyph. And you can add up to 3 glyphs to a set. So let's start with a glyph I'd always recommend having as a set. A health, mana, and stamina regeneration glyph set. As long as you stay within the boundary of this glyph, you will always recover these 3 attributes, which will aid you in staying alive if you are affected by damage over time or trying to tank damage. You can also create glyphs that will increase the skill damages like Magnum Shot, Smash, Charge, Uppercut, Dropkick, etc. Glyphs also have debuffing capabilities that you can place on the ground where a target within the aura will be affected. But yeah, whether you're trying to up your damage modifiers, replenish lost resources, or give yourself an advantage against a foe, glyphs may be one of the more important items to one's repertoire. Let's move over and talk about Blessings of Ladeca, which are unique buffs to each race, starting with the human's Breath of Ladeca, which adds 10% movement speed and a 5% damage boost to all talent skills. Breath of Ladeca indirectly affects Arcanas, since talent skills like Smash, Magnum Shot, Fireball, etc. are multiplied through Arcanas. Elves have Vision of Ladeca, which adds 10% more to non-Arcana archery skills and increases the aim speed to moving targets. And like humans, the archery skills Mag Shot and Crash Shot indirectly boost Ignis Plume and Aqua Volley. Giants have Might of Ladeca, which increases close combat skill damage by 15%, and again applies to your EK through buffing close combat skills like Smash. And Might of Ladeca speeds up attack speed of close combat weapons by 1 tier. So now that I've listed all this shit, let me give you some examples of what you can do to buff yourself or your allies. And like my buffing guide, you can tailor this to your needs. First and foremost, drink a power potion, magic power pot, or both if you need. Elemental Knight users sometimes utilize their magic casting abilities or need more magic attack in order to fulfill their Link 8 requirement, which adds another 50 max damage. And if you use a wand, Firebolt benefits from more max damage, just to name a few examples. Go ahead and summon your doll bags, and just before or at the beginning of a dungeon, place a cater down while wearing the Cooking Grandmaster title. The best bard in the party can buff with BFO or Vivace. If you are a Harmonic Saint, you can also include March Song along with the main buff with Polyphonic Melody, just to give everyone that boost in movement speed. And remember to twan these buffs when the buff is about to expire in order to extend the duration. Remember your tech cards and which sets you have for different encounters, as well as which consumes you have on hand. When you do get to a boss room or a room you need to go all out, make sure you have your consumes, music buffs, and tech cards in order. And after you're done debuffing, in no particular order, use 5231 or exploit weakness yourself. Use your Spirit Awakening, your Blessing of Ladeca, whichever one it might be, and then refresh your Scythe buff. And as you can see, attacking a debuffed target with buffs has devastating effects. For all you healers out there, in order to stack heals, you can lay down a Zone of Renewal, Life Anthem, a Health, Stamina, and NP Glyph, and Pulse of Purification. And remember, they all stack, but you can mix and match depending on your situation. Well, there you go, buffing up in Mabo. Hopefully this wasn't too overwhelming, and pairing buffing with my debuff guide can take you far in the game. So if you haven't seen that yet, I'd heavily recommend it as a companion video to this one. Let me know if you have any questions, concerns, maybe I got something wrong, and share these guides with all that are looking to play Mab or want to get into combat. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more. Have fun, dudes, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Yeah, cool. Peace.